The Imperial warship, Dominion of Stars, drifted through the Black Sea of space like a silent predator. Its hull, carved from silver alloy and glowing faintly with power, was a symbol of control and fear. Inside, the halls were wide and cold, echoing with the footsteps of armored guards. The Empire's banners hung from the ceiling, each one marked with the sharp crest of the Emperor, a reminder of their rule across 1,000 worlds. In the great audience chamber, the air trembled with tension. The guards stood in rows, unmoving. The officials whispered in low, nervous tones. Everyone waited for the same thing: the arrival of a new species that had begun spreading through the galaxy at an impossible speed. Humans. Commander Thalcor stood at the head of the room. His armor gleamed like polished obsidian, and his 4 yellow eyes blinked slowly as he studied the empty doorway ahead. His tail flicked once, a sign of impatience. The humans were late. That alone was an insult. No one made the Empire wait. And yet, these small creatures from a forgotten corner of the galaxy seemed not to understand how serious this meeting was supposed to be. Thalcor's second-in-command leaned close and whispered, "Do they even understand who they're meeting, Commander?" His voice was tight, uneasy. "Perhaps they lack proper hierarchy." Thalcor's jaws opened slightly in a quiet hiss. "They will learn soon enough. Once they see the power of the Empire, they will kneel like all the others." The heavy doors at the far end of the hall began to move. The sound of metal against metal filled the chamber as the entrance opened. Every alien in the room turned at once. Silence fell so complete that even the hum of the ship's engines seemed to fade. Out of the bright white light of the corridor came 3 figures, short, soft-skinned, with strange hair on their heads and odd shapes on their faces that looked almost friendly humans. They walked with no guards, no weapons drawn. The first one, a tall man with brown hair and a sharp, curious gaze, stepped forward as if he were arriving at a dinner party rather than the center of a galactic empire. His companions, a woman with short black hair and a younger man carrying a small recording device, followed behind him casually. There was no fear in their eyes, no hesitation, only open curiosity. Commander Thalcor's voice boomed across the hall. "Humans of Sol, you stand before the Empire of the Infinite Stars. You will address me with respect." The human leader blinked. He turned to his companions, then looked back at Thalcor with an expression halfway between amusement and disbelief. Then, to the shock of every alien in the room, the man began to laugh. It started softly, just a small chuckle, but soon grew louder. His companions joined in, their laughter echoing off the metal walls. The sound filled the great chamber, bouncing from pillar to pillar like a song no one had ever heard before. The guards looked at one another, uncertain. The diplomats froze. Commander Thalcor's tail went rigid with anger. "What is this mockery?" Thalcor thundered, his voice shaking the air. "You dare to laugh in the presence of the Empire?" The human tried to calm himself, wiping a tear from his eye. "I'm sorry, really I am," he said between laughs. "It's just... You actually have thrones. You built this whole stage setup for a meeting? It's like walking into a movie set." The translator drones buzzed as they repeated the words in the Imperial tongue. Murmurs spread through the room. "Movie set? Stage?" The aliens didn't understand, but they could feel the tone, the careless humor, the total lack of fear. Commander Thalcor's armor creaked as he straightened to his full height. "This is no performance, human. You stand in the Hall of Power. You stand before the Empire itself." The human nodded as if listening to a lecture, still fighting a grin. Right, Power Empire, got it. I just didn't expect so much gold everywhere. It's like someone decorated it using every cliché of space royalty we've ever seen." One of the guards hissed and raised his weapon, but Thalcor held up a hand to stop him. His eyes narrowed. "You find this amusing?" "Honestly? Yeah," the human said, still smiling. "We expected something scary. You know, dark energy fields, mind control, something terrifying. But this is theater." The word theater meant nothing to the Empire. But the tone, the ease, the lack of fear did. Thalcor had faced hundreds of species, crushed rebellions, broken armies. None had ever dared to laugh in his presence. Yet these small, fragile beings stood there, grinning like they were in on a private joke. He felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Confusion. Perhaps, Thalcor said slowly. You do not understand the situation you are in. The Empire rules this region of space. Every system you have entered belongs to us. You are here to negotiate your surrender or your extinction. The woman stepped forward, hands clasped behind her back. Her voice was calm and even. That's not how we see it, she said. We're explorers, not conquerors. We thought this was a meeting between equals. Equals? Thalcor repeated, his tone sharp. Do you claim equality with the Empire? The younger man with the recording device raised it and muttered quietly, Oh man, he actually said it like that, straight out of a villain's speech. The device blinked red as it captured the moment. The woman gave him a gentle elbow to the ribs, but she was smiling too. Thalcor's patience cracked. You dare record this meeting? The human captain shrugged. Of course. It's historic. The first time humans met the big bad Galactic Empire. The translator repeated the phrase, and every alien in the room stiffened. Big bad? The words translated roughly into something like monstrous tyrants. The guards shifted, ready to strike, but before the situation could explode, the human raised his hands and said lightly, Relax, we're not mocking you. Well, maybe a little, but only because this is so much like what we expected. Thalcor's voice dropped into a low growl. You speak in riddles. The human took a breath, finally letting the laughter fade. All right, let me explain. Back on Earth, we used to tell stories about meeting other civilizations. In those stories, the aliens were usually powerful, proud, and very serious, just like you. And the humans? Well, we usually messed up their plans by accident or by laughing at the wrong time. So when we walked in and saw this, thrones, banners, soldiers, it felt like we were walking into one of those old movies. The chamber was silent again. For a long moment, no one moved. The aliens stared at the humans, uncertain whether this was bravery or madness. Finally, Thalcor leaned forward. You compare the Empire to fiction? Sure, the captain said cheerfully. But hey, don't take it the wrong way. You've got great style. One of the aliens near the door let out an involuntary sound that almost resembled a laugh. It was quickly silenced by a glare from Thalcor, but the humans noticed. The woman raised an eyebrow. See? Someone gets it! Thalcor slammed the butt of his staff against the floor. The sound echoed like thunder. Enough! You will show proper respect or what? The captain said softly, cutting him off. His smile faded, replaced by something steady and cold. You'll attack us here? After we came in peace? You might win, Commander. You might even destroy our ship. But the moment you do, every human colony in this sector will know what happened. And trust me, humans don't take kindly to bullies. Thalcor froze. There was something in the man's tone that wasn't mockery anymore. It was confidence, certainty. The same tone Thalcor himself used when commanding a fleet. He studied the human's face and saw no fear there, only calm awareness. The tension hung heavy in the air, like a blade waiting to fall. The guards' hands twitched near their weapons. The human woman met Thalcor's gaze without blinking. The young man's recorder still glowed faintly, and then once again the captain smiled. But let's not go there, he said, voice light again. We didn't come to fight. We just wanted to talk. And honestly, Commander, if this is how you greet everyone, I think you could use a bit more humor in your diplomacy. The translator drones hummed, turning the words into imperial speech. The phrase more humor made little sense to them. Yet somehow, even without translation, the tone was clear. It wasn't threat, it was something stranger. Disarming, human. Commander Thalcor found himself at a loss for words. For the first time in his long career, he couldn't decide whether to execute, arrest, or applaud the beings in front of him. They stood there so easily, so alive, as if the Empire's power meant nothing to them. And perhaps, in their minds, it didn't. In that vast and silent hall, with the stars shining coldly beyond the viewports, something shifted. The laughter of the humans still seemed to echo faintly, like an afterimage of warmth in the heart of steel. And though Thalcor would never admit it aloud, a small, unfamiliar thought flickered at the edge of his mind. He wondered, just for a moment, what it would feel like to laugh too. Just for a moment, what it would feel like to laugh too. The chamber emptied slowly after the humans were escorted to their quarters, though the word escorted was used loosely. The guards kept their distance, uncertain whether these strange creatures were naive or dangerous. Commander Thalcor remained alone in the great hall, his reflection staring back at him from the polished floor. The laughter still rang in his ears. It was not the harsh, mocking sound he expected from enemies, nor the desperate kind that comes from fear. It was something else entirely, warm, unguarded, and alive. It unsettled him more than any weapon could have. He turned sharply and marched toward the council chamber. The great metal doors parted, revealing a ring of high-ranking officials seated around a shimmering table. Their holographic displays flickered with streams of data, records of the human ship, its technology, its behavior. They all looked up as Thalcor entered. "They mocked us!" hissed Minister Corral, his frilled crest bristling in disbelief. "In the throne hall! In front of the guards!" "Commander, how could you allow this insult?" Thalcor's jaw tightened. "Because they did not attack. And they were not afraid." "Then they are fools," another counselor said. "Fools die easily." "No," Thalcor replied slowly, his voice low. "They are not fools. They are something else, something we do not yet understand." Corral slammed his fist against the table. "What is there to understand?" "They are soft creatures from a minor planet without noble blood or proper order. Their species has barely escaped its own star system. We could crush them before their laughter finished echoing." Thalcor's gaze darkened. "And yet, Minister, they laughed in the face of that knowledge." "Why?" No one answered. The silence stretched, thick and uneasy. Finally, one of the younger strategists spoke. "Perhaps it is their nature," she said. "The archives mentioned that humans use laughter as defense, to hide fear, to confuse others." Thalcor considered this. "If that is true," he said, "then they are masters of it. Because I felt no fear in them." The council dismissed him with cold words and demands for obedience. They would allow him one more meeting with the humans before deciding the Empire's response. Thalcor bowed stiffly and left, though the unease in his chest grew heavier with each step. For the first time in decades, he could not predict what would happen next. Meanwhile, in the guest quarters, the humans were laughing again. Captain Reynolds sat cross-legged on the floor with his crew. The younger officer, Diaz, replayed the recording of their encounter on a small projector. The holographic image of Commander Thalcor's furious expression hovered above the table. Each time he shouted, the humans burst out laughing. "Oh, man," Diaz said between chuckles. "Did you see his face when you said movie set? He almost imploded." Reynolds grinned. "I was hoping humor might throw them off, but I didn't expect it to work that well." The woman, Lieutenant Hara, leaned back against the wall, shaking her head. "They're so dramatic, like ancient kings wearing armor in a world of lasers. That's the thing," Reynolds said. "They've ruled so long they've forgotten what normal looks like. They live inside their legend." Hera's smile faded slightly. "You think they'll retaliate?" "Maybe," Reynolds said quietly. "Empires don't like being laughed at. But fear works both ways. If they can't understand us, they can't predict us either. That's our advantage." Diaz raised his head. "You think humor can really protect us?" Reynolds nodded slowly. "It's not the humor itself, it's what it represents. We don't bow. We don't play their game. We make our own rules." Outside their quarters, unseen by the humans, a small drone drifted through the corridor. Its sensors recorded everything, their voices, their gestures, even the sound of their laughter. The data streamed directly to Thalcor's private console. He stood watching the feed in silence, arms folded. The humans' behavior fascinated him. They showed no signs of deceit, no secret codes or hidden weapons. They were simply human. And yet that simple thing felt alien beyond measure. He watched the way they joked, the way they laughed even as they discussed danger. It reminded him of something he had long forgotten. The sound of his own people before the wars, before the Empire demanded endless silence and obedience. He turned off the screen, disturbed by the memory. The next day, Thalcor called for another meeting. This time it was smaller. No thrones, no banners, no audience. Just him, the humans, and a round table. The humans arrived with the same easy confidence, though Reynolds raised an eyebrow at the change of setting. "Nice table," he said lightly as he sat down. "Looks less like a stage today?" Thalcor ignored the comment. "You came to speak of peace," he said. "So speak," Reynolds smiled politely. "We came to talk, yes. Peace is a good start. But to be honest, Commander, we were hoping for a little conversation first. Maybe even some understanding." "Understanding is earned," Thalcor said. "You mock what you do not comprehend." "Maybe," Reynolds replied. "Or maybe laughter is how we begin to understand things that scare us." That caught Thalcor off guard. He stared at the human captain for a long moment. "You feared us, then?" "Of course," Reynolds said simply. "You have warships that blot out the sky. You control entire star systems. Fear makes sense, but we learned long ago that fear doesn't help us think. Laughter does. Laughter helps you think?" Thalcor repeated the words like a puzzle. Reynolds leaned forward slightly. "Yeah, when we laugh, it reminds us we're still alive. It reminds us not to take our fear too seriously." For the first time, Thalcor didn't immediately respond. He studied the humans carefully. The woman's eyes were sharp but kind. The young one's smile was nervous but genuine. None of them acted like conquerors. None like victims. He felt the faintest crack appear in the certainty that had ruled his life. "If what you say is true," Thalcor said, "then your laughter is a weapon." Reynolds chuckled. "You could call it that. A very strange one." Thalcor's voice grew quieter. "And what happens when the Empire cannot laugh?" Reynolds looked at him for a long moment. "Then maybe it's not as strong as it thinks." The silence that followed was not uncomfortable, just heavy with thought. For the first time, Thalcor dismissed the guards. He wanted to speak without eyes watching. The humans stayed, relaxed but alert, sensing the shift in tone. Thalcor said slowly, "When I was young, before I joined the fleet, my people lived near the singing canyons of Duroc. The wind there made sounds that could almost be laughter. I used to listen and wonder what it meant. But when I joined the Empire, I was told it was just noise. We do not laugh in the service, Captain. It is considered weakness." Reynolds' expression softened. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard." Thalcor almost smiled, though the motion felt strange on his face. Perhaps. He ended the meeting soon after, but something had changed inside him. He found himself thinking about those canyons, about the sound of the wind and the memory of something simple and free. The humans had stirred something dangerous in him, a kind of curiosity that the Empire considered close to rebellion. That night, Thalcor stood alone on the observation deck. Stars stretched endlessly before him, silent and cold. He thought about power, about control, about how the Empire demanded respect through fear. And he wondered if maybe, just maybe, the humans had discovered a different kind of strength, one that came not from silence, but from laughter. In their quarters, the humans watched the stars too. Hera turned to Reynolds. "You think we got through to him?" "Maybe," Reynolds said. "But even a small crack in a wall like that can spread." Diaz grinned faintly. "What if we end up starting a revolution?" "With jokes?" Reynolds laughed softly. Wouldn't be the first time in human history. None of them knew it yet, but the seeds were already planted. The laughter they brought into the Empire's halls had not died. It had echoed through the corridors, carried by whispers, by curious guards who told others what they'd seen. And slowly, quietly, it began to spread. Even aboard a ship of war, even among beings who had forgotten how to feel joy, a sound began to return, the sound of something old and powerful, something that no empire could ever truly command. The sound of laughter. The human ship Odyssey drifted beside the massive Imperial vessel like a silver fish beside a sleeping Leviathan. To the Empire, it was a fragile craft, small and thin, hardly more than a curiosity. Yet inside its hull, a strange kind of energy filled the air, laughter, music, and the hum of life. Humans moved through narrow corridors, talking, arguing, teasing each other, as though they weren't floating beside the most dangerous warship in the known galaxy. Captain Reynolds sat in the observation bay, his boots resting on the low railing as the planet below spun in silence. Its surface glowed like green glass under the light of a nearby star. Beside him, Lieutenant Hara read a report on her tablet, occasionally looking up at him with a half-smile. They've been quiet since yesterday, she said. No messages, no threats. You think they're planning something? Reynolds shrugged. Probably. Empires always plan something, but I think Thalcor's not like the others. He's thinking. That's dangerous, she said softly. For them, Reynolds replied, his grin faint but sure. Once people start thinking, they stop obeying without reason. Down the corridor, Diaz was tinkering with a projection drone. The little sphere spun in the air, flickering through images from Earth. Crowds laughing in a park, fireworks, children dancing in the rain. He turned. Children dancing in the rain. He turned when Reynolds entered. Hey, Captain, he said, holding up the drone. I've been showing them this. Them? Diaz pointed toward the small monitor on the wall. The feed showed 2 Imperial engineers standing in a nearby docking bay, watching the projection through a thin security field. The humans had invited them for cultural observation. At first, the aliens had been suspicious, but now they stood motionless, transfixed by the floating images of people laughing, hugging, celebrating. One of them whispered something to the other, and though the translator struggled to capture it, Reynolds caught the word. Beautiful. Reynolds crossed his arms. You think they get it? Maybe not the details, Diaz said, but they feel it. You can't fake that. Later that day, Commander Thalcor visited the Odyssey himself. He arrived with no guards this time, only a translator drone hovering quietly by his shoulder. The crew stared but didn't salute. Instead, they nodded politely, offering coffee, tea, and even a plate of chocolate bars. Thalcor studied the items on the table. What is this? Hospitality, Hara said simply. Something we do for guests. He picked up one of the wrapped bars and examined it suspiciously. It is edible? More than edible, Diaz said. It's sacred, Reynolds laughed. Just try it. The commander unwrapped the chocolate carefully, as though it were a delicate relic. He sniffed it, frowned, then took a small bite. His eyes widened, and for a moment the strict lines of his face softened. He didn't speak, but the humans could see the faintest hint of wonder. Diaz whispered, We got him. Thalcor set the bar down slowly. This is complex, he said at last. Sweetness, bitterness, warmth. You made this? Hara smiled. We made it a long time ago, back when we thought sugar was magic. Thalcor tilted his head. And now? Now we know laughter is, Reynolds said. The commander's gaze lingered on them, thoughtful. You speak of laughter as if it is a weapon, yet you use it like kindness. Both, Reynolds said. Sometimes they're the same thing. Thalcor did not reply, but when he left the Odyssey, he carried the chocolate wrapper in his hand. That night, he sat in his quarters aboard the Imperial ship. The wrapper lay on his desk, its crinkled surface catching the light. He stared at it for a long time, thinking of how humans could turn simple things, sugar, sound, smiles, into something powerful enough to challenge fear itself. The Empire's greatness had been built on silence and obedience, yet here was a species that built unity from noise and chaos. When his communication terminal chimed, he answered it reluctantly. It was Minister Koral again. Commander, the minister said coldly, the Council has decided. The humans will surrender their ship and technology or face destruction. We cannot allow mockery to spread. Thalcor's jaw tightened. And if I refuse? Then you will be replaced. The line went dead. He sat there in the silence, the hum of the ship filling his ears. He looked again at the wrapper, then at the stars beyond the window. For the first time in his life, he felt trapped, not by enemies, but by the very system he had sworn to serve. When morning came, the Odyssey received an encrypted message. Hara read it aloud. Meeting requested. No council, no guards. Bring light. They met him again, this time in the abandoned cargo deck between the ships. The space was dimly lit, full of empty crates and floating dust. Thalcor stood waiting, the expression on his face unreadable. Reynolds approached carefully. You said to bring light. Hera lifted a lantern and switched it on. The soft glow spread across the walls, turning the metal gold. Thalcor looked around, his voice quiet. When I was a child, My mother told me stories of the First Empire. They believed laughter was a sign of weakness. They silenced it. And when the last song died, their hearts died too. We rose from their ashes, and now we repeat their mistakes. He stepped closer. Your people frighten the council because you do not kneel. But I think they fear something deeper, that you remind us of what we lost. Reynolds nodded slowly. You haven't lost it. It's just buried. Thalakor's eyes glowed faintly in the light. Buried things can still burn. He handed Reynolds a small data crystal. This contains access codes to the Imperial Communication Array. You can broadcast a message, a short one. But once it starts, they will come for us all. Reynolds accepted it carefully. Why help us? Thalkor's answer was simple. Because I want to hear them laugh again. When he left, the humans returned to the Odyssey and began preparing. They worked through the night, rerouting power, encrypting signals, synchronizing with the Imperial Array. At dawn, the transmission began. Across the Empire's networks, every screen flickered. Soldiers on distant outposts, workers in massive factories, children in orbital academies, all stopped to stare as a strange image appeared. 3 humans, smiling. Behind them, a banner that read, "The universe is big enough for all of us." Then came the sound. Soft at first, a ripple of laughter. Not cruel, not mocking, but real and bright. It spread through the channels like wildfire. Engineers paused to listen. Pilots laughed without knowing why. Even the Emperor's own attendants hesitated, caught by something they couldn't name. The transmission ended in less than a minute. But the sound remained, replayed, copied, whispered. It couldn't be erased. When the council demanded Thalkor's arrest, half his crew refused the order. By the time the guards reached his quarters, he was gone. Some said he fled into the border systems. Others whispered that he joined the humans. The truth was simpler. He disappeared among the stars, following the echo of laughter that would not die. Weeks later, the Empire's ships began reporting strange encounters, outposts where soldiers were sharing jokes, officers who questioned their orders, citizens who smiled at strangers. It was quiet at first, then unstoppable. In the end, no great battle marked the change. No fleets clashed, no cities burned. What destroyed the Empire's fear was not rebellion, but the return of something far more dangerous, hope. And in the archives of a distant colony, a simple message remained. It was recorded by Diaz, the young officer who had once teased his captain about starting a revolution with jokes. The message was short, only 3 words, but it outlived every empire that followed. Laughter conquers all. It was said that sometimes, if you traveled near the old imperial worlds, you could still hear it. Soft, human laughter carried by the winds of dying stars, reminding the universe that even in the darkest halls of power, joy could find its way home. The message spread faster than anyone expected. It raced along the Empire's data streams like sunlight through cracks in old stone. No one could stop it. No matter how many orders came from the High Council, no matter how many servers they shut down or terminals they confiscated. By the time the second day ended, the sound of human laughter was playing on every major communication channel. At first, people tried to mute it. Then they began to listen. Then, they began to smile. In the warship Dominion of Stars, deep inside the heart of the Empire, Commander Thalkor's old crew whispered among themselves. They were frightened, confused, and yet oddly drawn to the strange feeling the humans had brought into their world. The youngest of them, a technician named Vera, played the recording over and over again on her private console. She didn't understand the words completely, but she understood the sound. It made her chest ache in a way she had never felt before. It was as if the sound carried light. When the alarms began to ring, she turned them off. She had been ordered to report any infected terminals to security, but instead, she closed her door and kept listening. For the first time, she realized that silence was heavier than sound, and that the Empire had kept them quiet for too long. Across the fleet, others were doing the same. Soldiers, administrators, pilots, they all heard it. The laughter didn't demand loyalty, didn't call for rebellion. It simply reminded them that there was something missing in their lives. Some tried to resist, repeating the words of their leaders, "Order is strength. Emotion is weakness." But the laughter didn't sound weak. It sounded alive. The High Council was furious. In the towering citadel of the capital world, Minister Corral stormed through the chamber, shouting at the technicians. "Erase it! Burn it from the networks! I want silence across every channel before dawn!" One of the technicians, an older male with trembling hands, looked up at him and said softly, "It can't be deleted, Minister. They copied it too many times. It's in personal systems now, in memories, in devices we can't reach." Corral's crest flared red with rage. "Then purge them all. Every terminal, every ship, every—" He stopped. Somewhere in the corner of the chamber, one of the soldiers laughed. Just once, quietly, nervously. Coral turned to glare, but the moment had already spread. Another chuckle. Then another. The air began to ripple with the sound that had infected half the Empire. Coral's voice failed him. For the first time in his career, he felt small. The laughter was everywhere. Far away on the Odyssey, the humans were watching the aftermath unfold from orbit. Their ship's sensors showed massive data fluctuations across Imperial space, communication disruptions, blackouts, then signals bursting to life again. It was chaos, but not the kind that ended in violence. Something new was forming, invisible but powerful. New was forming, invisible but powerful. Hara sat at the console, watching the data with wide eyes. "They're listening," she whispered. "All of them. The whole network." Reynolds leaned over her shoulder. "Good," he said quietly. "Now we wait." Diaz was pacing behind them. "Wait for what? For them to send their armada? You know they're going to retaliate." "Maybe," Reynolds said. "But something tells me Thalcor bought us more time than we think." And he had. At that same moment, in a remote Imperial outpost near the border systems, Thalcor stood before a group of officers who had gathered in secret. The room was dimly lit, the walls bare, the floor scattered with loose equipment. The men and women standing before him looked uneasy, but their eyes were bright. They were not rebels, at least not yet. They were just tired of being afraid. "You all heard it," Thalcor said, his voice low but steady. The sound that broke the silence. "You've served this empire long enough to know what it has become. We are told to protect order, but what is order without spirit? What is power without joy? The humans showed us something we forgot." One of the officers spoke, hesitant. "They laugh in the face of power." "It's dangerous," Thalcor nodded. "Yes, dangerous to fear, dangerous to tyranny. But maybe that's the kind of danger we need." They stood in silence. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant, but in that room, warmth began to grow. Not the warmth of rebellion or hatred, but the quiet warmth of shared understanding. A soft sound came from the back of the room. Someone laughed, just once, quickly, almost embarrassed. The others turned. Then slowly the sound spread, uncertain but real. Thalcor closed his eyes and listened. The old empire was cracking, and this was the sound of something new pushing through. The humans didn't know it yet, but the ripple they'd started was turning into a wave. On worlds that had never known freedom, people were beginning to tell jokes. Soldiers shared funny stories in whispers. Children, hearing the strange sound from the stars, tried to imitate it. They didn't even know it was called laughter. They just called it the sound that makes the dark smaller. On the capital world, the Emperor sat in silence before his advisors. His throne chamber was vast and cold, built to inspire fear, but tonight it felt empty. The laughter still echoed faintly in his mind, replaying in defiance of his will. He could not stop it. For the first time, he wondered what it would feel like to join in. "Your Majesty," said one of the advisors, "the humans must be destroyed. If they live, the infection will spread." The Emperor looked up slowly. "You call it infection? I call it something we lost." The advisors stared, uncertain whether to respond. The Emperor rose from his throne. "Bring me this Captain Reynolds, alive." Back on the Odyssey, the humans received the transmission. It was unexpected and brief, a single sentence translated into human language. "The Emperor requests your presence." Reynolds read it aloud, his expression unreadable. Hara frowned. "A trap!" "Almost certainly," Reynolds said. "But we're out of messages. We've done what we came to do." Diaz looked nervous. "You really want to walk into their capital?" Reynolds smiled faintly. "Why not? We've already made them laugh. Let's see if we can make them think. 2 days later, the Odyssey descended into the atmosphere of the imperial capital world. The city stretched like a sea of metal and light, endless towers reaching toward a sunless sky. They landed near the palace, a structure so vast it looked carved from a mountain. Soldiers surrounded them, but none raised their weapons. Even in the Emperor's city, laughter had left its mark. Some of the guards' eyes were softer now, curious rather than cruel. They were escorted into the throne hall where the Emperor waited. He was an imposing figure, tall, cloaked in silver armor, his face lined with age and authority. But when he spoke, his voice was calm. "Humans," he said, "you've changed my empire." Reynolds stepped forward. "We didn't mean to. We just laughed." "That's what frightens me," the Emperor said. "You conquered without trying." Reynolds shook his head. "We didn't conquer. We reminded you that fear isn't strength. That control without joy isn't order. It's emptiness." The Emperor studied him for a long time. "You believe laughter can save civilizations?" Reynolds met his gaze. "I think it already has." The hall was silent. The soldiers watched, waiting for the order to strike. But the Emperor did not speak. Instead, something strange happened. His shoulders trembled. His mouth moved. And then, slowly, painfully, a sound emerged. Dry, cracked, uncertain. It was laughter. The guards froze, staring in disbelief. The sound spread, hesitant at first, then stronger. The Emperor laughed again, and this time it was clear, deep, and alive. The hall shook with it. The echoes filled every corridor, every chamber, every heart. When the laughter reached the streets, people stopped what they were doing. They looked up at the sky, hearing their Emperor's voice carried through the city's communication towers. No one had ever heard him laugh before, and in that single moment, the great machine of fear that had ruled their lives began to break apart. In the following days, decrees were overturned. Slaves were freed. Soldiers laid down arms. For the first time in centuries, the empire stopped expanding. Instead, it began listening. When the humans departed, they left behind no weapons, no trade agreements, no demands. Only a recording, a simple archive of laughter shared freely with the Emperor's scientists. It became known as the sound that changed the stars. As the Odyssey left orbit, Hara looked back at the glowing world below. "You think they'll keep it up?" she asked. Reynolds smiled. "They will. Once people learn how to laugh again, you can't make them stop." And far behind them, in a vast throne room that had once been silent, the sound of laughter continued, soft, unending, carrying through the halls like a song that had finally found its way home. The years that followed were not peaceful, but they were alive. The Empire, once the unshakable heart of fear and obedience, was now something else entirely, something unpredictable. Its citizens began to speak openly. They told stories, painted walls, wrote poems, and, most dangerously of all, questioned their leaders. Every act of rebellion began the same way, with laughter. It was quiet at first, uncertain, almost shy, but like sparks on dry leaves, it spread. The humans had returned to their colonies, believing their mission was over. The Odyssey continued to explore the outer regions, mapping nebulae and chasing signals from beyond known space. Captain Reynolds aged, his hair silvering, but the grin never left his face. The galaxy was still dangerous, still full of old empires and new powers, but everywhere they went, he heard the same rumor whispered by traders and wanderers. The empire was changing. They called it the Great Softening, though some preferred another name, the Age of Joy. On one quiet evening aboard the Odyssey, Lieutenant Hara stood in the observation bay. The stars looked different now, softer somehow, as though the universe itself had relaxed. She turned as Diaz entered, carrying 2 cups of synthetic coffee. "Still can't sleep?" he asked, handing her one. "Never could," she said with a tired smile. "I keep thinking about them." "The Empire. Do you ever wonder what happened after we left?" Diaz chuckled. "Every day. The news feeds say their cities are full of color now, music in the streets. Even the soldiers carry instruments instead of shock rifles. I saw a clip of an officer juggling." Hara laughed softly. "You're kidding." "Nope." They call it human influence. They even have festivals dedicated to that first broadcast. They play the laughter on loop. She leaned against the window, watching the endless dark. Funny, isn't it? We never fired a single shot. Diaz's grin faded. Yeah, but we might have started something even more dangerous. He wasn't wrong. In the corners of the old empire, where the laughter had reached but the warmth had not yet taken root, something was stirring. Not everyone saw the change as salvation. Some saw it as weakness. To them, the laughter was a sickness that had turned proud warriors into jesters, emperors into clowns. On a distant moon once used for military training, a man named Sarek Vel gathered those who still believed in the old ways. He had been an officer once, decorated, fierce, and loyal. He had watched the fall of fear with quiet horror. To him, the sound of laughter was the sound of decay. "We were gods," he told the crowd that had gathered in the hangar, his voice echoing off the cold walls. "We ruled the stars with order and purpose. And now we giggle like children. Our fleets play songs instead of drills. Our soldiers paint their armor. This madness must end," the crowd murmured in agreement. Behind Sarek stood a banner, not the bright symbol of the reborn empire, but the old black and gold crest, polished and menacing. "We will bring silence back," he said. "We will restore fear. Fear is the foundation of control, and control is life. They called themselves the Quiet Legion, is life. They called themselves the Quiet Legion. News of the Legion spread slowly, hidden beneath layers of rumor. But when the first rebel ship attacked an Imperial vessel, the illusion of calm shattered. The ship's crew, instead of fighting, had tried to reason with their attackers, even offering them music and food. The Legion destroyed them without hesitation. Their final transmission was chillingly simple. "The silence returns." When the news reached Earth, the United Human Fleet convened immediately. The Empire had been an uneasy ally, but its transformation had brought stability. If it fell back into tyranny, the entire region could ignite in war again. Captain Reynolds was called out of retirement. He was older now, slower, but his voice still carried weight. The Council asked him to return to Imperial space as an observer. Officially, he was a diplomat. Unofficially, he was the only man who had ever made an Empire laugh. When the Odyssey launched again, its hull bore new markings, symbols of peace, art, and unity. But inside, the crew knew their mission was once more uncertain. Hera, now the ship's executive officer, watched Reynolds closely. He seemed quieter, more thoughtful, as though the years had worn away some of his brightness. "You don't have to do this," she told him as the stars blurred by. "Yes, I do," he said simply. "We planted the seed. If it's growing wrong, it's our responsibility to fix it." When they arrived in Imperial space, they were greeted not by warships, but by lights. Dozens of beacons shimmered in the void, each projecting a holographic image, faces smiling, laughing, weeping with joy. It was the Empire's new defense grid, not made of weapons, but of memories. Each light represented a citizen who had recorded their laughter as a gift to the stars. The humans were guided to the capital world, where a new emperor awaited them, a young woman named Eris, chosen not for her bloodline, but for her voice. When she spoke, her words carried calm strength. "Captain Reynolds," she said, greeting him in the hall that had once been cold and silent. Now it was full of color, plants, and music. "Your people gave us something we didn't know we needed. But there are those who want to take it away." Reynolds nodded. "We heard about the Quiet Legion. They want to bring back the old order." Eris's expression darkened. "They've already taken 3 outer worlds. They broadcast silence, total communication blackouts. When their ships arrive, the laughter stops. We can't fight them with weapons. They feed on conflict." Reynolds looked around the chamber. The air smelled of flowers, of life. "Then don't fight them with weapons," he said. "Fight them with what they fear most." The Emperor tilted her head. "Laughter." He smiled faintly. "Not just laughter. Connection. Show them that joy isn't weakness, it's defiance." So the Empire began a campaign unlike any in its history. Instead of raising fleets, it raised voices. Instead of armies, it sent artists, storytellers, and scientists. Across the contested systems, they built great communication towers called echo spires. each one designed to broadcast sound, songs, laughter, the heartbeat of life itself. The Quiet Legion struck hard. They burned the first spire to ashes, its engineers captured and executed. But even as the flames rose, the sound didn't stop. The people of the nearby city stood in the streets and laughed together, even while the soldiers advanced. The Legion hesitated. For the first time, they saw unarmed civilians stand unafraid. They didn't understand it. They couldn't. The conflict became known as the War of Voices. The Quiet Legion sought silence. The new empire and its allies sought sound. Battles weren't fought for territory, but for the right to be heard. And in the middle of it all was the Odyssey, carrying a single message that reached both sides. The universe doesn't need to choose between fear and freedom. It can have laughter instead. As the war spread, stories of miracles began to circulate. Soldiers who had defected after hearing a single joke. Generals who laid down their arms after remembering how their children used to smile. Even the enemy ranks began to crack. In the final engagement above the world of Duroc, the same place Thalcor once spoke of, the Odyssey was caught in the crossfire between Legion and Imperial ships. Its communication systems were failing. The fleet was moments from collapse. Reynolds, weak and coughing from smoke, stumbled onto the bridge. "Can you get a broadcast out?" he asked Hara. "Barely," she said. "The system's burning out." "Doesn't matter," he said. One last laugh. He pressed the manual override and spoke into the mic, his voice old but steady. "To anyone who can hear me, this is Captain Reynolds of Earth. Don't let the silence win. Tell a story, sing, laugh, make noise, no matter how small. The universe is listening." Then he laughed, softly at first, then louder and louder, until the sound filled every frequency. Across the battlefield, systems flickered. The sound reached every ship, every soldier, every frightened being clinging to life. Some cried. Some smiled. But none remained still. When the Odyssey finally went dark, the war ended. Not because one side destroyed the other, but because no one could remember why they had been fighting. In the years that followed, Captain Reynolds' message became legend. The Empire and humanity built the first shared network of peace, called the Harmony Array. It carried one signal, looping endlessly across the stars. A single, human laugh that had once broken the silence of an empire and taught the galaxy how to be free. Long after the War of Voices had faded into history, the laughter still traveled. It rode the radio waves that never stopped echoing across the void, woven into the background hum of the universe. Travelers passing through distant systems could sometimes catch it by accident. A faint chuckle, a warm burst of sound hidden in static. Most ships ignored it. A few stopped and listened. Those who did said it made the stars feel closer. On a quiet colony world named Virella, a young girl named Leon grew up hearing those echoes. Her grandmother told her stories of the humans and the Empire, of how laughter had changed everything. But to Leon, those tales sounded impossible. How could a sound stop a war? How could something as simple as joy be stronger than fleets or fire? She wanted to believe it, but the world around her seemed too practical, too focused on trade routes and technology to care about myths. The Empire and humanity were now allies in the Galactic Accord, a union of dozens of worlds. There were schools, markets, research outposts. Life was orderly, peaceful, and yet in the shadows of that peace, something was fading. People smiled politely but rarely laughed. The old songs had become formal anthems. Even the recordings of human laughter, once played at every festival, had been archived, filed away under cultural history. Progress had brought silence again, only this time. It came quietly. Leon was 16 when she first heard the unfiltered signal. It was late at night, and she was lying awake in her small dorm room at the Orbital Academy. The ceiling panels glowed faintly blue. The hum of the station filled the air. She had been trying to tune her small receiver to intercept deep space frequencies, a hobby she wasn't supposed to have. Her instructor had said such things were distractions from real science, but she liked listening to the galaxy breathe. That night, as she adjusted the dials, the noise shifted. Static turned to rhythm. Then faintly a voice spoke. It was human, but older, rough with age. "This is Captain Reynolds of Earth," the voice said, the words trembling with distortion. "Don't let the silence win." Leon sat upright. She knew that name. Everyone did. The founder of the peace era, the man whose laughter changed the stars. She had seen his statue in the Capitol Plaza. But the recordings they played there were clean, formal, scripted. This one was raw. It felt alive. She turned the volume up, her heart racing. "Tell a story," the voice continued. "Sing, laugh, make noise no matter how small. The universe is listening." And then came it. The sound. The laugh that had echoed through centuries. It wasn't perfect. The transmission was old, corroded. But it was human in a way nothing else was. Warm, defiant, real. Leon didn't sleep that night. When morning came, she brought the recording to her instructor. Professor Elar, a tall, silver-scaled alien whose tone was always polite but distant. "Sir," she said breathlessly, "I think I picked up the original human transmission. The one that started the accord." Elar listened quietly, his 4 eyes narrowing. When the sound ended, he switched off the receiver. "Child," he said, "do you know what this is?" "Yes," Leon said eagerly. "It's a piece of history. We should share it." "No," Elar interrupted. "We should bury it," she blinked. "Why?" "Because peace is delicate," he said calmly. "Our world runs on stability, not emotion. The last time laughter spread unchecked, it burned empires and rewrote law. You think you can handle that kind of chaos?" Leanne hesitated. "But it's just sound. That's what they said before," Elar murmured. "And look what it did." He confiscated the receiver, but Leon had already made a copy. That night, she replayed it in her quarters. The laugh echoed softly like a heartbeat. She smiled to herself and whispered, "Maybe that's what we need again." The next week, she began sending the signal out across the Academy's network, hidden between data packets and code updates. At first, no one noticed. Then someone did. A janitor in the lower maintenance bay found it and played it through the speaker system. The laughter rolled through the empty halls like sunlight breaking through dust. A group of students heard it and began to laugh too, unsure why. One of them recorded the moment and shared it on the public channel. By morning, the entire orbital station was buzzing. Some called it a glitch. Others said it was a prank. But many recognized the voice. Captain Reynolds had returned, his laughter alive again in the networks. Authorities tried to delete it, just as the old empire once had. But it was too late. Every time they erased one copy, 10 more appeared. Students encoded it into their assignments. Engineers slipped it into software updates. It spread beyond the academy, out into the trade systems, the colonies, the fleets, and just like before, the laughter began to change people. Meetings became less formal. Pilots painted jokes on their hulls. Markets erupted into spontaneous celebrations. Someone even hacked the central broadcast tower on Varela and replaced the official anthem with the recording. For a full minute, the entire world stopped and listened. Then they laughed. It wasn't rebellion this time. It wasn't about destroying or defying. It was about remembering what they'd forgotten. That peace without joy was just another kind of silence. But not everyone agreed. In the quiet corners of the Accord, certain factions began to worry. They said the humans' influence was too strong, that emotion was clouding logic again. A council was formed to investigate cultural disturbances. They called it the Committee for Tranquility. Their task was simple: contain the laughter before it became uncontrollable. Leon became their first target. She was summoned to the Capitol for questioning. The transport ship was filled with officials, all polite, all smiling in the empty way people do when they've forgotten how to feel. As she sat there, looking out the window at the curve of the planet, she wondered if Captain Reynolds had known this would happen, that laughter would need to be defended again and again. When the ship docked, she was escorted into a white chamber, round and silent. The walls shimmered faintly with soundproofing fields. A woman sat across from her. She was human, but dressed in the sterile gray of the committee. Her eyes were sharp and tired. "You sent the signal," the woman said. "Why?" Leon hesitated. "Because people stopped laughing." The woman studied her. "And you think laughter will save us?" Leon met her gaze. "It saved us once." The woman leaned forward. Child, the galaxy doesn't need saving. It needs order. Do you know what happens when people stop taking things seriously? They stop obeying. They start questioning. And that's when wars begin again. Leon swallowed hard. Maybe the real danger isn't laughter. Maybe it's forgetting why we needed it. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the woman reached into her pocket and took out a small, battered device, a personal recorder. She pressed play. The sound filled the room. The same laugh, faint but unmistakable. Captain Reynolds. Leon's eyes widened. I was there, the woman said quietly. Not on the Odyssey, but on one of the colonies that heard the broadcast. I was a child then. I remember what it felt like. She turned off the recorder and sighed. You were right to send it again. But be careful. Every generation forgets, and every generation needs someone foolish enough to remind them. Leon smiled faintly. Then I'll be that fool. The woman returned the device. Then don't get caught again. Leon left the chamber without punishment. Officially, the committee dismissed her case. Unofficially, they let her go because the laughter was already unstoppable. It had reached the council halls, the starports, the trade fleets. People were humming the rhythm of it, laughing without knowing why. When she returned to Varela, the skies were full of light. Ships from every world were arriving, carrying musicians, storytellers, dreamers. The first interstellar festival of laughter had begun. It wasn't planned. It just happened, one spark at a time, until the whole galaxy was smiling again. That night, as the celebrations filled the air with noise and color, Leon stood on the hill above the city. She turned on her small receiver one last time. The voice played, crackling with age. The universe is listening. She looked up at the stars, her reflection glowing in her eyes, and whispered, Then listen to this. And she laughed, a sound full of life, full of everything that made humanity what it was. Somewhere, light years away, the faintest echo of her voice joined the chorus of old transmissions drifting through the void. 1,000,000 years from now, someone would still hear it and smile, not knowing why. And in that moment, the universe would remember again. Centuries passed. Civilizations rose and fell like waves on a shore, but the laughter never stopped. It became something larger than humanity, larger than the empire that once ruled 1,000 stars. It became a constant, woven into the background static of existence, a frequency that no machine could erase and no ruler could silence. Some said it was alive. Some said it was memory itself. The galaxy had changed again. The old alliance of humans and the reformed empire had long dissolved, replaced by a vast, decentralized network called the harmonic core. It stretched across hundreds of systems and species, bound together not by politics, not by blood, but by resonance, by the shared language of sound. The core believed that emotion was energy, measurable and transferable. Whole cities were powered by laughter reactors, immense resonant chambers that captured the emotional frequencies of joy and turned them into light. It was a golden age, brilliant and strange, but every age believes itself the last, and peace always forgets its own fragility. At the farthest edge of the core, where the light of civilization dimmed into quiet stars, a ship drifted without a name. Its hull was black, its engines silent. Inside sat a being who had forgotten how to laugh. He called himself Orcs, though the name meant nothing anymore. Once he had been a researcher studying resonance energy. He had watched laughter power cities and heal planets, had believed it was pure. But then he saw what it could do when harnessed wrong, how the same frequencies that built harmony could be inverted to destroy it. He saw the experiments that nobody spoke about, the dark mirrors of the laughter reactors, the so-called silencers. The silencers were devices that didn't just absorb sound. They consumed it. Entire regions where they had been tested fell into unnatural quiet. No wind, no music, not even the hum of atoms moving in the air. A silence so complete that reality itself seemed to thin. Those who lived near it spoke of losing memories, of dreams that came in grayscale. And so, Orcs left. He took a small ship and disappeared beyond the borders of the core, chasing a single, impossible goal, to find the original source of the laughter. The first broadcast, Captain Reynolds's voice, the one sound that had once woken the stars. He had been searching for 30 years. The ship's systems flickered as it entered an abandoned sector, a dead cluster known as the Shadow Belt, filled with derelict stations and broken satellites. The coordinates he followed had come from an ancient archive, a reference buried inside the original human files. The message had been damaged, but a fragment remained. The Odyssey, final beacon transmission, unknown quadrant. Irix adjusted his trajectory. His ship's scanners picked up a faint pulse, rhythmic and uneven, buried beneath layers of cosmic noise. It was weak, but it was there. He followed it through drifting debris until the source came into view. The Odyssey, or what was left of it. The hull was split in half, frozen in time, a relic of an age when humans still traveled by courage rather than convenience. Its metal bones glowed faintly with starlight. As his ship approached, Irix felt something he couldn't name. The silence around him seemed to lift, replaced by the soft hum of memory. He docked carefully and entered the wreck. The corridors were empty, filled with dust and echoes of movement long gone. Every step stirred a whisper of old life. He passed faded writing on the walls, Earth script still legible after centuries. Messages carved by the crew, still laughing. He found the bridge at last. The consoles were dark, but the captain's chair still stood, half melted, half preserved. A small recorder sat in its base, its light flickering faintly. He reached out, hands trembling, and pressed play. Static filled the air. Then came the voice. "This is Captain Reynolds of Earth." The sound was faint, broken by time. But the tone, it carried something impossible. Irix closed his eyes and let it wash over him. "Don't let the silence win." Then the laugh came. It started soft, human, imperfect. And as it played, the ship itself seemed to remember. Lights flickered to life. Consoles blinked. The air began to hum. Irix looked around in awe. The laughter was resonating through the wreck's walls, like a key unlocking a door that had been sealed for eons. He didn't realize the silencers had followed him. 3 ships emerged from the void, black and silent as shadows. They bore no insignias, but their hulls carried faint symbols that once belonged to the old quiet legion. They were still alive, still clinging to their ancient creed. That laughter was chaos, that silence was perfection. Their leader, a being wrapped in black resonance armor, hailed Irix's ship. The transmission carried no voice, only a text. "Return the frequency or be erased." Irix stared at the message, his pulse hammering. He could run, but the signal would die with him. The laughter would be buried again. He looked at the recorder and then at the ship around him. "You gave the stars something they forgot," he whispered to the ghost of Captain Reynolds. "Let's remind them." He activated the resonance amplifier on his ship and linked it to the recorder. The system protested. The power draw was too high, but he didn't stop. Outside the silencer ships. But he didn't stop. Outside the silencer ships.